herbs and spices of the Bible. Herbs and spices have been used for millennia to flavor food, as medicine, in perfumes, in burial and religious rituals, as skincare and cosmetics, and in dyes and pigments. They were an important part of trade and commerce in the ancient times. So what's the difference between an herb and a spice? The most simple explanation is that herbs are the fresh part of the plant, and spices are the roots, stalks, seeds, or bark, usually dried. As a general rule, herbs are more subtle in flavor and aroma, whereas spices are more pungent. It is possible for a plant to be both an herb and a spice, such as Coriandrum sativum, whose leaves are referred to as cilantro and whose seeds are commonly called coriander. There are a number of both herbs and spices mentioned in the Bible. They are often in a long list, where some of them sound familiar, but not all of them. Let's take a closer look at them and their significance to early life. In the Gospels, we learn that with Pilate's permission, Joseph of Arimathea came and took Jesus' body away. He was accompanied by Nicodemus, who brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 75 pounds. Aloes are over 650 species of flowering succulent plants. The most common is aloe vera, or true aloe. Aloes are used for medicines, skincare, digestives, and to make the color chartreuse. Myrrh is the rosin from the sap of the Camophora tree found in Arabia. This spice is used in perfume, incense, medicines, and when mixed with wine, myrrh becomes a potent painkiller called gall, which was offered to and refused by Christ at his crucifixion. As a burial spice, myrrh mixed with aloes was used to anoint Jesus' dead body before wrapping it in linen strips, using more of the spices in the folds. In the book of Exodus, God specifies to Moses that the oil of consecration to be used to anoint the tent of meeting, all the articles in it, and the priests would be a specific blend of liquid myrrh, cinnamon, cassia, calamus, and olive oil. Calamus, sometimes called sweet flag, is a flowering plant grown in the wetlands. Essential as an aromatic oil in perfume making, it has a cinnamon-like fragrance. Cinnamon cassia and cinnamon verum are two different plants, though closely related in flavor and aroma. Both are used to produce bark or sticks used for flavoring, and in oils for medicine, food, and drink. Cassia, with its darker color and more pungent taste, is grown in China, whereas the lighter-colored cinnamon verum, or true cinnamon, with its sweet, delicate flavor and many papery layers, comes from Ceylon. Psalm 45 tells us that on his wedding day, the king's robes were fragrant with myrrh, aloes, and cassia. Also in the book of Exodus is God's recipe for the temple's incense, offering a fragrant aroma pleasing to God. The burning of incense is representative of prayer and worship. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Take fragrant spices, gum rosin, onycha, galbanum, and pure frankincense, all in equal amounts, and make a fragrant blend of incense, the work of a perfumer. Do not make any incense with this formula for yourselves. Consider it holy to the Lord." Gum rosin, or storax, is the aromatic sap of the liquid amber orientalis, which grows wild in northern Syria. It has a woodsy or earthy smell. Used in perfumes, incense, and medicines, it also provides natural protection against insects, fungus, and pests. Onycha is neither an herb nor a spice, but is derived from the shell of a marine mollusk found along the shores of the Red Sea. Onycha has a leathery smell. It is still used today to make incense in Japan, India, and the Middle East. Galbanum is another aromatic gum rosin from the Ferula family. It is described as having an intense green fragrance with woody and balsamic elements. Native to the mountain ranges of northern Iran, it is a brown, viscous liquid which solidifies into resin. Frankincense is the dried rosin from the sap of the boswellia trees grown in Arabia. It is used in perfumes, incense, and has many medicinal properties. You'll recall, in the Nativity narrative, on coming to the house, the Magi saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, acknowledging his kingship, frankincense, symbolizing his holiness as our high priest, and myrrh, foreshadowing his suffering and death. Moving on, balm, or balsam, is a group of trees known especially for the buds from which a rosin is produced, making soothing ointments to heal and moisturize the skin. In ancient times, balm came from Gilead, beyond the Jordan River. We see it first in Genesis, when Joseph's brothers sell him to a caravan carrying spices, balm, and myrrh to Egypt. A few chapters later, balm is mentioned again, when Jacob sends his sons back to the unrecognized Joseph, bearing the finest gifts in the land. Balm, honey, spices, myrrh, pistachios, almonds, and double the amount of silver. In the Song of Solomon, the king compares his bride to a garden, saying, "Your plants are an orchard of pomegranates, with choice fruits, with henna and nard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, and every kind of incense tree, with myrrh and aloes and all the finest spices." Let's take a look at some of those. The vivid stigma and styles, together called the threads of the saffron crocus flower, produce one of the most highly prized spices for seasoning and coloring of food. Flower petals of the crocus must be gently peeled away by hand to collect the saffron threads, rendering the price of saffron today at over $40 per ounce. It requires over 4,000 blossoms to produce 1 ounce of saffron. The henna tree is a flowering plant native to hot, semi-arid, and tropical areas like northern Africa and Asia. In addition to medicines, henna is used for cosmetics, skin, and hair care. Most commonly, it is known as a dye for hair, skin, and fingernails, as well as for fabrics such as silk, wool, and leather. Henna was a valued plant for adorning any bride. A henna ceremony is still a treasured pre-wedding custom for Jews today in Spain, Morocco, the Middle East, and India. Nard, sometimes called spikenard, is more commonly known today as lavender. It is an aromatic plant originally grown in the Himalayas. It produces a much prized fragrant oil used as a perfume and incense and for health and well-being. Both the Gospels of Mark and John tell us that just before his triumphal entry into Jerusalem, Jesus was anointed with nard when he was in Bethany, dining with Lazarus and Simon the leper. It says, "Then Mary, the sister of Lazarus, took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' head and feet, wiping his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume." Hyssop, part of the mint family, is an evergreen with flavoring and medicinal properties. In the Bible, hyssop is most often mentioned in association with spiritual cleansing. It was used in rituals for the sprinkling of blood by Moses or the priests, saying, "This is the blood of the covenant, which God has commanded you to keep." When David repented his affair with Bathsheba, he wrote, "Cleanse me with hyssop, and I will be clean. Wash me, and I will be whiter than snow." The writer of Hebrews continues, "The law requires that nearly everything be cleansed with blood, and without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. So Christ was sacrificed once to take away the sins of many." Mandrakes are a flowering plant in the nightshade family. Found in wheat fields of the Mediterranean, mandrakes bear fruit in the spring. Though toxic, in ancient times they were used for a number of medicinal purposes, including as a narcotic, and were thought to be an aphrodisiac and to stimulate conception. We see them in the book of Genesis, amidst the sisterly rivalry between Rachel and Leah for their husband Jacob's love. Jesus used the mustard seed as a symbol of something small that grows into something big, like the kingdom of heaven. From among the tiniest seeds planted in the garden grows a huge mustard tree that shelters the birds in its branches. meaning from the beginning of a few people, the gospel of God's love has spread around the world. Jesus also tells us that faith is similar. It only takes a tiny bit of faith to say to a mountain or a mulberry tree, "Be uprooted and move into the sea," and it is done. Nothing is impossible for those who believe. In Exodus, the Israelites were commanded to eat the Passover lamb with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. These would be plants that grew abundantly in that region, including chicory, endive, bitter crasses such as cardamom, watercress, or peppercress, hawkweeds and sow thistles, both relatives of the dandelion, and wild lettuces. They were to remind the Israelites of bitter years of bondage in Egypt. In the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, we see where Jesus accused the scribes and Pharisees of hypocrisy, saying, "You give to God 1/10 of everything you have, even the mint, rue, dill, cumin, and every little herb in your garden. But you don't obey the really important teachings of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. Yes, you should tithe, but you shouldn't leave the more important things undone." Finally, salt is neither an herb nor a spice. It's a mineral, but salt too finds a place among that which enriches our lives and worship. A covenant of salt, like the one God made with the priestly line of Aaron or the kingly line of David, represents a binding commitment in perpetuity from one generation to the next. Salt also represents peace, grace, and wisdom. Jesus tells the disciples, "You are the salt of the earth," referring to the goodness and kindness the Christians should be bringing to the world. But he continues, if that salt loses its flavor, how shall it be able to season? Meaning, if we don't practice offering kindness through the power of the Holy Spirit, we will become tasteless and lose our ability to make a difference in the world. Finally, Paul tells us in Colossians, "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned as it were with salt, so that you may know how to answer each person." May this knowledge inspire a greater sense of awe as you worship the Creator, the sovereign God of the universe.